Joey? With the sun streaming into the room, hitting me square in the face, I stretched, feeling every single nerve in me sing. Holy shit. I had never had a night like I had last night. I blinked awake, staring at the ceiling, dreading rolling over. Had the alcohol dulled my senses? Had I gone home with a hideous guy? Finally, I turned my head, and the bed was empty. Inhaling deeply, I glanced around the room, trying to find any sign of Zan. He was nowhere to be seen. Even his clothes were gone, mine folded neatly on the nightstand, and I sighed with relief. Not that I didn't want to see him again, but I thought it would be a bit awkward. I'd never had a one-night stand before and didn't know the protocol of the next morning. Sitting up, I grimaced at the dull ache in my pussy. That would take a little time to get used to today. Zan had stretched me like no one ever had. Reaching for my clothes, I pulled them to me, dressing my top half before moving to my underwear and skirt. A slip of paper was sitting where my clothes had been, and I frowned, picking it up. Rosie. Thank you for one of the most incredible nights I've had in a long time. I will be back about 11 o'clock if you would like to have a late breakfast with me. But I understand if you don't. If I don't see you again, let me tell you this. You are beautiful, and any man who thinks otherwise is an idiot. I enjoyed your company immensely and hope you enjoyed mine. Zan. Enjoyed was an understatement. I was absolutely delighted in his company. He'd been amazing. It was a foolish thought. He might have been the best I would ever get. But I knew it was probably the truth. Guys weren't exactly lining up to be with someone who was outside the weight range of the beauty norms, and they usually hightailed it out of the relationship once we'd slept together. Sighing, I turned over the note and picked up the pen which had been left on the nightstand and left a note for him in return. Placing the pen back on the nightstand, I picked up my bag and dug into it, finding my lipstick. Smearing some on, I lifted the note and kissed it, leaving an imprint of my lips on it, and smiled, placing it with the pen. Turning, I walked out of the room, closing the door behind me, and made my way down to the lobby and out into the morning sunshine. Seeing a cab parked a few buildings up, I ran to it and climbed in. Giving the driver my address, I slumped back in the seat and tried not to think about the night before, because every time I did, my stomach would flutter and my heart would race. My phone pinged in my bag, and I dug into its depths and pulled out the device. There were about a dozen messages and 2 missed calls, all from Jake. Damn it. Dialing him, I held my phone to my ear and waited. Joey, where are you? Are you okay? I could hear concern in Jake's voice, but then the screech of Phoebe came to the line, and I closed my eyes as I heard the phone become muffled and yelling. Jake came back to the line. I'm fine, Jake. I'm on my way home now. Where were you? What happened? Was I going to tell him after ditching his fiancée, I met the most incredible man who fucked me until I passed out? No, I couldn't tell him that. He would have had a fit, telling me how irresponsible I was, and I could have been hurt. He didn't even like me dating guys because he worried about my safety. I met up with some friends when I came out of the club to find Phoebe. The line fell silent again. Went out to find her? Oh shit. Yeah, I felt bad for the bouncer letting only me in, so I went out pretty much straight away to catch up with her again, so we could go to another club, and she was gone. I saw some other friends and went off with them instead. Oh, she didn't tell me she'd left. Me, bullshit artist of the year. Check, well she did, but that's okay. I hope she had a great time with the girls. I could hear muttering on the other end of the line, and Jake sighed. Look, I don't like that you and Phoebe don't get along, but can you just try and be civil to each other tomorrow? For me. Clenching my jaw, I stared at the back of the driver's head. Sure. Good. Look, we're having lunch with Mom and Dad today. It feels weird without you here too. Want to come? Lunch with Jake's family? Let them feel sorry for me? Jake's mom, Maria, knew I liked her son more than just a friend. And while I knew she loved me like a daughter, she hadn't been able to look at me in the eye since Jake's engagement. Look, I can't. I want to make sure I'm rested for tomorrow, okay? I will be at the venue at 9, like Phoebe wants. I'll see you tomorrow, Jake. He sighed. Okay, see you tomorrow. The line clicked, and I all but threw the phone. Shoving it back into my bag, I huffed. The cab pulled into my apartment complex car park, and the driver turned to me. We're here, miss. Oh, thank you. I pulled some money from my purse and smiled at him. "Keep the change." "Thanks," he called out as I exited the cab, and he drove off. Climbing the steps to the front door, I punched in my code and walked into the lobby. Collecting my mail on the way, I patted the resident cat Mittens and made my way up to the third floor and my small apartment. Letting myself in, I dumped my mail on the hall stand, hanging my bag on the hook by the door, and dropped my keys into the small Japanese bowl Maria Kazumi had bought me as a gift from Japan 2 years earlier. Walking through the apartment, I threw on the taps in the bathroom and stripped off, looking at myself in the mirror while the water heated. There were telltale signs I'd had an interesting night. There were purple blotches on my nipples where Zan had suckled them. As I rode him and I squinted at my hips, turning to the side. Were they finger marks? I frowned, vowing to take it up with him. "Get a grip, girl. It was one night. You're never going to see him again." I rolled my eyes at my own stupidity and stepped into the shower, hoping I'd be able to wash away some of the anxiety I was having about the following day. 12. Alex. "How long are you staying for?" Mom had finally unwrapped her arms from around my neck and was sitting beside me on the sofa, holding my hand, patting the back of it. No one else was here yet, just me and Mom, and I was loving her sole attention. It was something rarely given to me as a child, not with Jake around. I smiled at her, squeezing her hand. "I have business meetings on Monday. I have to go home on Sunday morning." "Oh!" Her beautiful face fell, and I felt a pang of guilt. I wish I could have stayed longer, but being here for 4 days was all I could conjure out of Yuka and Sana's deal, and I couldn't tell my mom that my boss told me I couldn't stay longer. In traditional Maria Kazumi style, she'd be on the phone in seconds, chewing Yuka a new asshole. "That's not long enough. We wanted to spend some more time with you than that. You haven't been home in so..." "Alexander?" I closed my eyes at the sound of my brother's voice as it encroached on the beautiful moment Mom and I were having. Inhaling, I opened my eyes and turned my head, looking at Jake for the first time in person in 10 years. "Little brother." Standing, I walked over to him and held out my hand. "Congratulations on your engagement. I did get you something, but left it at my hotel. I'll bring it for you tomorrow, with your wedding gift." Jake looked at my hand, then passed me to Mom. "You invited him?" My jaw clenched and my hand dropped, body tensing. "Here we go. Jacob, it's been 10 years. Your brother came all the way from New York to be here for your wedding. Be nice." Mom admonished, and Jake looked at me again, his own jaw clenching. "New York, huh?" "Yep." "Long flight?" "Not really. Little over 3 hours. Got in late last night. I could do this. Small talk. I just hoped to God Jake wouldn't bring up what happened 10 years earlier. That I couldn't do." "Well, thanks." Jake held out his hand. "I appreciate you coming." I gripped my brother's hand, shaking it. It was clammy and weak, and I let go as another shadow came to the door and my father walked into the room, nodding, but not saying a word to me, as he walked to his favorite chair and sat down. Then came the overwhelming smell of cheap perfume. I hadn't set eyes on Phoebe since high school, and time hadn't been kind to her. Her once naturally blonde hair now seemed to come from a bottle, burned and frazzled at the ends, and if she had any more makeup on her face, I could have carved a slice off and handed it out at a kid's birthday party. She blinked as she looked at me and Jake, slipping her arm into his. "Jake, baby, who's this?" You remember my brother Alexander?" Phoebe blinked, looking from me to her fiancé and back. I couldn't help but notice the way her eyes ran up and down my body, and for the first time ever, I suddenly had the feeling she thought of me as a piece of meat she could devour. "Oh, sorry. I didn't recognize you. You look different." Phoebe would see the variance in Jake and me. I was taller, broader across the chest, had a fuller head of hair, and didn't look like I was in my early 30s, even though I had just celebrated my 32nd birthday. Jake looked like a tired, overworked businessman in his early 40s, with his thinning hair, wrinkles at the corners of his eyes, and a slight pouch to his stomach. What the fuck had he been eating? Junk all his life? Being Mom's baby and the only kid at home after I left, I wouldn't put it past him to have gotten away with that. "That's fine," I replied, turning and walking back to the sofa, taking up my spot next to Mom again, and she took my hand, patting it as if it would calm me. It wasn't me who needed to be calm. Jake looked like he was ready to throw down at any moment, and Phoebe looked like she wanted to jump me. I came to say hi before the wedding tomorrow. Do you want to stay for lunch? Mom asked, and I turned to her, shaking my head. I'm sorry, Mama. I have a lunch date with someone. I can't. I didn't know if Rosie would still be at the hotel. I hoped she would. But even if she wasn't, I wouldn't stay here and play nice with Jake. Not when I could clearly see he wanted to have it out with me. Now he was older and thought he was a man. But if I fought with him, I might just put him in hospital this time. There was a reason Doi had told me he looked forward to seeing me at the annual clan fight. I was the reigning champion, 3rd year running. That's not fair. She pouted and I sighed, reaching out and caressing the side of my mother's face. I had truly missed her beauty, her simple yet elegant style and humble demeanor. We haven't seen you in 4 years and haven't had you home in 10. I just want time to catch up. I know, Ma. I'm sore. How about we all go out for dinner tonight? My jaw clenched at Phoebe's voice, and I ground my teeth as Mom's face lit up. Oh, yes! That would be great! What about it, Alex? We can catch up. Jake, you can invite Joey. I'm sure she'd love to catch up with Alex, too. I turned my head to my little brother, who promptly shook his head. I called Joey earlier. She wanted to stay home today and make sure she is rested for tomorrow. I wouldn't be able to convince her if I tried. You know what she'd like. Stubborn as hell. Got that right. Phoebe muttered, and I pushed my tongue into the side of my mouth to stop myself from having a go at her. Even though I hadn't seen Joey since she was 13, there was one thing I knew about her, which wouldn't have changed. She had never been stubborn. Oh, that's a shame. I looked back to my mom. You'll just have to catch up with her at the wedding tomorrow, then. I sure will, I smiled. Well, Phoebe, you and Jake make a dinner reservation for 7, and we will make sure we have Odusan and Okasan ready. My grandparents? I frowned and let go of my mom's hand, placing my hands between my knees. Great. 2 more people I really didn't want to see today, or any other day for that matter. My father's parents had immigrated from Kyoto when I was 12, moving in with us. My grandfather I could deal with. He was a simple man who liked to garden and listen to the radio. He had a pension for good sake and quality tobacco and was most of the time asleep. My grandmother was a tyrant and probably the reason I was a bit of a rebel when I was younger. Nothing I ever did was good enough for her. And even now, even if I told her I was helping keep the family afloat by sending money home every month, she would still find a way of making it a bad thing. It's going to be lovely having the whole family here. Mom gushed and stood, ushering Phoebe and Jake out, leaving me on the sofa and my father sitting in his chair on the other side of the room. I looked at my dad. Ever the quiet, stoic one of the family, he got his cool, calm demeanor from his own father. My dad lifted his gaze to mine and nodded at me. Alexander. Pa. I nodded back, not expecting much more from him. My father was not one for drama or conversation. It took courage for you to come back. I blinked at him, leaning back on the sofa, listening to my mom and Phoebe's conflict about where was the best place to eat tonight. It wasn't courage, Pa. It was respect. Ma wanted me to come back. I came back. Phoebe's voice rose in the other room, and I watched my dad visibly wince. You don't like her, do you? What's not to like? She has a voice which sets off the neighbor's dogs and the figure a junkie would be proud of, not to mention straw for hair. I snorted and my hand flew up, covering my mouth, as my dad chuckled and shook his head. Look, your brother seems happy. I don't want to ruin it for him. But yes, I do not like her. My hand lowered and my father's gaze moved to it. My gaze dropped and I clenched my jaw, pushing down the long sleeve of my shirt. Damn it. I didn't want my parents to know about my tattoos. In Japanese culture, tattoos were taboo and usually associated with the Yakuza. While that's exactly who I worked for, I didn't want my poor innocent mother to know about it. My father's gaze lifted to mine, and I could see the concern in his gaze. Work is good. I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply, before I looked at my dad and nodded. Work is work. They treat you well? He was fishing, wanting to know what I did. How I could send them money every month without a hiccup. As well as expected. Are you okay there? I am more than okay, Pa. I am respected and am close to the boss. I smiled at my father. I had to be close to Yuka. I was his head of security. I knew practically everything about him and his routines. If I was any closer, I would be able to tell people when he went to take a shit. I am treated like family. It took my father a moment to reply, but he nodded his head. Good, but I would suggest finding something a little longer in the sleeves for tonight. If your grandfather saw those, he would not be impressed, not to mention what your mother would say. I nodded, bowing my head slightly. Understood. Good. Now, you'd better head off to your lunch date before your mother locks you up here. I laughed and stood, bowing to my father, and left the room, heading into the kitchen. Ma, Jake, and Phoebe were at the kitchen counter, obviously having sorted out where we were going for dinner. Ma, I have to go, or I will be late to my lunch date. My mother turned to me, throwing herself at me, and I chuckled, wrapping my arms around her. I don't want you to go. Cancel your lunch. Ma, I'll be back later. Fine. She huffed, letting go of me, and looked up at me. Make sure you're back here by 6. Understand me? Yes, Ma. I chuckled and stepped back from her. My gaze shifted to Jake, and I nodded at him. I will see you later, little brother. I left my parents' house, taking the hire car I'd gotten that morning, back to my hotel room, the anticipation of seeing Rosie building. I wanted to bury myself inside her again, feel her body writhe under me, have her ride my cock as I suckled her nipples again. Fuck! I adjusted myself as I pulled up at the hotel and inhaled, trying to calm my body down. Climbing from the car, I locked it and walked across the parking lot to the lobby and to the elevators, my stomach churning with every step I took. Letting myself into my room, I tossed the keycard to the counter and went to the bedroom, and stopped. The sheets still laid rumpled, the sign on the door telling housekeeping not to come in, having worked, but there was no sign of Rosie. Her clothes were gone, and the note I'd left under them had been moved. Sighing, I moved across the room and sat on the side of the bed, picking up the note. Bright red lipstick covered neat writing, and I smiled at the note she'd left me. Xan, if the night with me was the most incredible you've had in a long time, then you need to get out more. But seriously, thank you for making me feel like the goddess you kept calling me. I'm sorry I can't stay longer. I would have loved to share a late breakfast with you. Thank you again for letting me forget my problems for the night. All my love, Rosie. I chuckled at the first line. Maybe she was right, but she was also selling herself completely short. She had been incredible and so malleable under my hands. A soft kiss, a firm hand. She had melted against me in ways I had only dreamed of. She had been every single part of the goddess I had called her. Well, there went the best fuck I've had in my life. I threw myself back on the bed and stared up at the ceiling. There was no way of finding out who she was, not when we'd not given our real names or told too much private information. It had literally been a dirty night together, with no strings attached. Usually I would have been fine with that. But why did it feel like I had just let the best thing walk out of my life by being the good son and brother and catching up with my family? I could have still been balls deep inside Rosie right now. For fuck's sake. Standing, I tossed the note back onto the bedside table and moved through the hotel room and tried to find something to do, until I had to go play Happy Families. 13. Joey. This is Jake. Leave a message. Frowning, I sighed and hung up. This was the 3rd time tonight. His phone had gone to voicemail. Sure, our conversation earlier had been a little heated, but was he ignoring me now? All I wanted to do was chat with him and clear the air, making sure we were still on good terms. If he was ignoring me, then he was being incredibly petty. But then the other idea came to my mind, that his bitch of a fiancé was keeping him from talking to me. I wouldn't put it past her. He's busy, idiot. I admonished myself, trying to trick my brain into being civil about Phoebe, even if it was screaming back at me that I didn't have to be. He's probably doing wedding shit. Of course he was doing wedding shit. Probably placating family. Whose? I didn't know or care. I'd met Phoebe's parents once, at their engagement party, and I knew exactly where Phoebe got her attitude from, and it wasn't her mom. I had a feeling I knew what Pa Kazumi thought of his son's fiancée. Something drastic would have to be offered, for Pa Kazumi to play nice with Phoebe's parents. My phone buzzed in my hand, and I looked down at it, smiling. Answering it, I grinned, ready to pour my heart out to the only man who listened to me. Hi, Papa. Hey there, Rue. How are you holding up?" My smile faded and I brought my legs up under me as I stared off into space, trying to keep the tears at bay. I had cried too much over the last month. I didn't want to cry more and have puffy, red eyes for tomorrow. Oh, ready to sabotage a wedding. My dad chuckled down the line. "Could you at least wait for me to get there before you kick off? I want to video it and post it online." I cackled, holding my spare hand to my face as my dad laughed on the other end of the line. "Pa!" His laughter died off and he changed the subject. "So, I fly into Paris on Sunday. Want to come for a visit?" I sighed, knowing he was doing it to try and protect my heart. "Papa, I'd love to, but I think I need time by myself to process things." He returned the sigh, and the line went silent for a moment before he spoke. "Then do me a favor, Rue. Go on a trip. Just for you. No one else. Don't tell anyone, even me. Just pack up and leave. You have nothing tying you to Miami. You need a fresh start." It was something I had been considering for a couple weeks now. Ever since Jake and Phoebe had announced their engagement, I had come to the conclusion that there was nothing for me in Miami anymore. Jake was moving on with his life, and the only friends I had other than him were at work. And even then, we weren't close. They weren't the kind of friends I would actively hang out with on the weekend. "I'll think about it. Good." We spoke of other things, with my dad trying to skirt the wedding as delicately as possible, while still showing me the disdain he had for Jake and Phoebe. I really wanted to stay on the phone with my dad and chat until I couldn't speak anymore, but I didn't want to be too tired for the wedding tomorrow. I knew I would need all my energy to get through it in one piece. "I better go, Pa. I need to get some sleep. It's going to be a very long day tomorrow." I almost thought not to go to the wedding at all. That had crossed my mind on more than one occasion during the day. That'd suit Phoebe just fine, but I knew, even though I was not his choice, it would still break Jake's heart, and as much as I was pissed as hell with him, I couldn't bring myself to do that to him. "Okay, make sure you call me after and tell me how garish it was. Maybe I might send you a nice French boy in my next package as compensation." I giggled. "Thanks, Pa. I love you." "Love you too, Rue." My dad hung up and I tossed my phone onto the sofa beside me. I didn't want a nice French boy. I wanted a rough, tattooed Japanese-American man. Mainly, I wanted Zan from the night before, and I was seriously kicking myself about not sticking around and having that late breakfast. I might have been in the throes of passion again, instead of sitting here, feeling sorry for myself. And I was definitely kicking myself about not getting his real name and number. But that was in the past, and I had to look to the future. I looked around the small apartment I had been renting since Dad had taken off on his trip, and frowned, thinking about what he had said. There was not much here. The sofa I sat on, a cabinet with a tiny TV on it, which was still practically new, my bedroom suite, and various kitchen appliances and things. I lived sparsely because of my work hours at the hospital. I was called in for random shifts, and I didn't really have the time or friends to entertain. What was in this apartment was my world, and I realized my dad was right. There was nothing holding me here. I could have walked out of my apartment tomorrow and not missed a single thing in it, bar a photo of Dad and me. I picked up my phone and opened it, looking at the screen which greeted me. A picture of Jake and I, happy before he met Phoebe. Clenching my jaw, I opened up my settings and replaced the photo with something random, and then opened up the internet search. I was going on a trip of self-discovery. Now I just had to pick a destination. 14, Alex. Such a disappointment. You're nothing like your brother. I blinked, chopsticks hovering just short of my mouth, and looked at my grandmother. Her pinched face had only become sourer and more wrinkled since I had left, and she peered at me, shaking her head. Disrespectful haircut, cheap clothing, just disappointing. I rolled my eyes, looking at my dad, who shook his head and brought his finger to his lips. My teeth ground together, and I put my chopsticks down and sat back in my chair, watching as my grandmother fussed over Jake and Phoebe. My dad lifted himself from his chair and helped my grandfather to his feet, and they walked outside into the crisp air for a cigarette, leaving me alone with my ma, grandmother, brother, and Phoebe. Definitely felt like the black sheep of the family now. My grandmother had already admonished me for not being married and having children. Being the oldest child, she had told me it was my duty to be the first one married, not leave it to my baby brother to set an example. Blah, blah, blah. Are you not eating, Alexander? My gaze moved to Phoebe. The annoyance at even being in the same room as her obviously shone brightly, and she blinked, lowering her gaze. I'm not hungry. Shouldn't have had so much to eat with your lunch date. Jake chimed in, pointing his chopsticks at me. It wouldn't have taken much for me to reach over, take one of them, and, obviously you had a big meal. His words trailed off with the death glare I gave him, and he also lowered his gaze. I guess that was one thing I was glad Yuka Takata had taught me. Intimidation. Without uttering a word, I could stare down anyone except for Yuka himself. It's a shame that big friend of yours couldn't be here. My grandmother chattered to my brother. What's her name, Zoe? Joey. Osan. Jake corrected her. And she's not that big. Jake, I had to buy her an extra-large dress. Honey, that's big. Phoebe added, and my gaze moved to her, in time to see her face flush and her eyes avert from mine again. I smirked. I was starting to enjoy this. The only reason my grandmother wasn't doing the same thing was because the woman was as blind as a bat. Probably why she kept referring to my hair and clothing as disrespectful and cheap. In my youth, I'd had no problem wearing outlandish hairstyles, including mohawks, and wearing grungy clothing. But since working for Takata, I had changed drastically. She just couldn't see it because she hadn't bought her glasses with her. Thinking about what Phoebe had said about Joey, I frowned. Extra large was not that big when it came to clothing. I wore an extra large shirt to accommodate my physique. Surely Joey didn't have broad shoulders like mine. And I liked women with more meat on them, and my mind went back to Rosie instantly. And you running off to hide? There she went again. I rolled my eyes and tipped back my head, staring at the ceiling as my grandmother continued. Leaving your parents all alone to raise their son. No help to them whatsoever. I lowered my head and looked at my mom, whose gaze was firmly planted on the plate in front of her. It had been always a sore point between me and her, the fact she wouldn't stand up to my grandmother when she started on me. I had been the woman's favorite victim as a child, and it hadn't seemed to change now that I was an adult. Obviously, Mom hadn't told my grandparents the reason they weren't in a nursing home was because of me and the money I sent every month. Because even though Jake was in business, he wouldn't be able to afford the lifestyle Phoebe demanded and help Ma and Pa at the same time. I sighed and sat up, reaching into my pocket and pulled out some cash. Leaning over, I kissed my mom on the cheek, pushing the notes into her hand as I did, and whispered quietly in her ear. I'll pay for everyone's dinner. I'm going to head back to the hotel now, unless you want Pa's Okasan's funeral to be the next big event. My mom's hand tightened around mine, and she lifted her gaze, looking up at me and nodding. Okay, drive safe, please, and we will see you tomorrow. I kissed her cheek again and stood, the table falling silent, except for my grandmother's babbling. Jake and Phoebe looked up at me in anticipation. I will see you both tomorrow. You're leaving? But we haven't even had dessert. Phoebe almost whined, and the last nerves, which she had managed to not play on, snapped, as Jake put his hand out and patted hers, saving her from a full blast of my temper. I'm sure Alex is tired. He's had a full-on day, and he only flew in last night. I commended his attempt at trying to play civil, and I nodded. Yeah, I'm toast, and I have to check in with my boss and send him some paperwork I had to finish on the flight down. Bullshit. Oh. Phoebe frowned, pouting, and the frown lines which should have been on her forehead didn't appear. Well, he's not a very nice boss then, is he? You're supposed to be here celebrating with us, and he's got you working. Oh, please. I could tell a mile away Jake didn't want me there, and the only reason she wanted me there was to drool over me. I'd caught her checking me out on more than one occasion, and the thought she was thinking about me sexually had made my stomach turn with sickness. She had nothing on the woman I had shared a bed with the night before. Well, I'll be sure to tell him when I speak to him next. I'm sure it'll go down a treat. Phoebe's face paled, and I turned to my grandmother, and as much as I didn't like the woman, I planted a kiss on the top of her hair. I'll see you tomorrow, Okasan. She muttered, and I turned, kissing the top of my mother's head. Night, Ma. Good night, Alex. We will see you in the morning. I turned and left the restaurant, ignoring the scantily clad women hanging around at the bar as I walked past. After Rosie last night, every woman I'd seen today had done absolutely nothing for me, and I knew the curvy beauty had ruined other women for me, like I knew she would. Stepping out into the cool night air, I sought out my father and grandfather. "I'm heading back to the hotel," Pa nodded, still propping my grandfather up while the man smoked a thinly rolled cigarette. "All right, Alex, we will see you tomorrow." Night. I walked through the car park, climbing into my car and sat back in the seat, watching my father as he guided his own back into the restaurant. I could see my family sitting inside, talking, laughing. Everyone else at that table, bar my beautiful parents, could have gone to hell, and I wouldn't have given a fuck about any of them. Sighing, I started the rental car and pulled out of the car park, heading back to the hotel, which would be my home for another 2 nights. Parking the car and making my way up to my room, I stripped off to my trunks, fell face first into bed, and slept like the dead. 15. Joey, I swore I was going to pop a seam. Damn Zan for making me eat those sweets. They might have been delicious, and he'd been true to his word by helping me work some of them off with the most intense and sensual night I had ever had in my life. But honestly, if I even breathed the wrong way right now, someone was going to cop a gold button in their eye. "Are you ready yet, Jolene?" I cringed at Phoebe's voice whining at me through the door, and I rolled my eyes. I turned to the door and walked over, carefully breathing in shallow breaths to stop myself from bursting at the seams, literally, and opened the door. While I didn't like her, I had to admit Phoebe made one of the most beautiful brides I had ever seen. The ivory gown she wore had been Jake's mom's, bought with them when they had moved back to America from Kyoto. The gown had been passed down for 3 generations on Jake's dad's side, and now it was Phoebe's turn to wear something I had only ever dreamed of being in. "Well, don't you look lovely," Phoebe said, looking down her nose at me. I bit back a retort and smiled, trying to do what I promised I would and remain civil. "Thanks." I knew what she really thought. She had picked out the colors of the dresses after Jake's mom had told him she needed to pick a color from each of the elements because it was a tradition passed down through the family. I had been lumped with the green dress. I hated green. It did nothing for my skin tone or hair, and it made me look like a giant lump of snot. "We've got half an hour until the wedding. Is the dress going to last that long?" My gaze moved from Phoebe to her 3 best friends, who were dressed in the most beautiful shades of blue, pale pink and yellow, who were also sniggering behind their hands. The same ones who had been with us the night I ditched Phoebe at her hen's night and met Zan. Well, if it had been bought in the right size, it would. One of Phoebe's friends hissed at me. "Maybe if you laid off the cakes, fatty." I blinked and sucked my tongue over my teeth as I looked at her. "What did you just say?" The woman's face paled, and she stepped back, almost hiding behind the other pair. I turned my attention back to Phoebe, who was smirking, and I lifted my head, looking up at her. "I'm going to find Jake and see if he needs help with anything." "You do that because after today, you're not going to be seeing him very often. Let me assure you of that," she replied, flicking her hair and turning back to her friends who rushed to her as if I'd hurt her. I rolled my eyes and turned, stomping to the door at this point, not caring if my dress ripped. At least I would be able to get out of being at this shit show. Slamming the door, I stomped through the gardens in my kitten heels, in the vain search of my best friend. I would stop this wedding, even if I had to clobber him over the head and drag him away. A laugh sounded through the garden, and I followed the high-pitched cackle of my best friend. He was standing near the venue's restaurant with his parents and someone else. I stared at the man standing beside Jake and blinked a few times, as if it might wipe his image from my eyes. It didn't, and my stomach started to cramp with sickness. No, 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 no. Jake lifted his head as if sensing me, a grin spreading across his face, as he saw me, and he rushed over, wrapping his arm around my shoulders and steering me toward his parents and the other man. "Joey, you remember Alex?" Alex turned his dark gaze toward me, and his eyes widened as he looked down at me. "Jolene?" I hadn't been called that by anyone other than my parents in almost 10 years, and by the exact man standing in front of me. Why hadn't I recognized him the other night? Was it the fact he'd matured, filled out nicely, or I was too overwhelmed with riding his... Alex came all the way from New York for the wedding because Mom asked him to. Isn't that nice? Throwing away any problems we had in the past to come and help me celebrate? Jake squeezed my shoulders, making my breasts plump a little more, and his brother's gaze dropped to my cleavage. My stomach roiled with the lust which suddenly lit his dark eyes, and my clit throbbed with need as his gaze lifted to mine again. It's good to see you again. I turned to Jake for a minute, trying to ignore his brother and the tone of his voice, all while trying to keep my breakfast in my stomach. I'm just here, seeing if you need anything else before you do this, like maybe a get-out clause? Jake screwed his nose up at me and laughed, planting his lips against my forehead. Geez, you're like the 5th person today who's asked me that. I'll be fine. I love Phoebe. We're made for each other. Got that right. Alex mumbled, and I turned my head, staring at him. He smirked and winked at me, before his gaze went to his brother, and it suddenly became cold. I'm going to the bar. I'll see you at the altar, Jacob. Jake. Geez, how many times have I told you it's Jake, not Jacob? Yeah, whatever. Alex turned to walk away, looking over his shoulder as he did. See you around, Joey. Fuck, I had to get out of here. Not only was I about to watch my best friend, the man I thought I would end up with, get married to someone else, but the man I had spent one of the most incredible nights with in my life was here too. And he was Jake's brother. Jake let go of me, stepping away to resume talking with his parents. And I frowned, turning and watching as Alex walked into the venue, heading straight toward the bar. Of all the people I could have a one-night stand with, why did it have to be Jake's brother? I'd never really had much to do with Alex as a kid, just the occasional hello, or when he'd pick Jake and me up from school. Some of my only memories of him were squashed up against him in the front of his Bronco while he drove us home. I had always been so aware of how much older than us he was, of how mature he seemed, even if he was only 9 years older than us. But I had never really known him enough to develop even a crush on him. Jake was going to lose his shit when he found out. If he finds out, I muttered to myself. If is good. Looking at the venue again, I flicked my gaze back to Jake for a second to make sure he was still busy and turned stomping toward the bar to confront Alex and make sure he didn't blab about our night together. 16. Alex. Fuck me dead, little Jolene Brewster. Joey, or should I have called her Rosie? The image of her bouncing up and down on my cock, her head tipped back as she come had me heating through, and I closed my eyes, needing my body to behave itself. If Jake found out, I'd fucked his best friend to within an inch of her life, and then she'd fallen asleep in my arms. He'd have the most epic of tantrums, and I'd be forced to break more than just his nose. You lied to me. Speak of the devil, and she will appear. I turned my head and looked at Joey, arms crossed over that magnificent chest, her hazel eyes glaring at me. I turned my head away and picked up my drink, sipping at the amber liquid, hoping it would give me enough courage to play my usual calm, cold self, because right now, all I wanted was to take her into the bathroom, lock the doors and take her on the tiled floor, and not care whether Jake found out or not. I thought I was never going to see her again after Thursday, and here she was. I did not. Yes, you did. She spat, and I smirked at the fight rearing itself up in her voice. God, she didn't know how much her spunk got me hot under the collar. She was nothing like the quiet kitten who almost went home from my hotel room. You told me you were here for family reasons. I put my drink down, looking at it for a second, before turning to her and raising an eyebrow as I leaned on the bar. I'm here for my brother's wedding. Isn't that a family reason? Joey sucked her tongue over her teeth and looked out the door, and my gaze followed. She was watching Jake with my parents, and a softness came to her gaze, which lit the fuse of my anger. After what we'd had a couple nights earlier, she was still pining after my stick-thin, little whingy bitch of a brother who was about to get married? What the actual fuck? I turned back to the bar and picked up my empty glass, showing it to the bartender, who promptly replaced it. As I reached for the scotch, a hand plucked it away, and I turned in time to see Joey down it in one shot. Not only can she cuss like a sailor, but she can also drink like one, too. She put the glass back down on the bar top and looked at me. We have a problem. Do we? The only problem I see is you just drank my scotch. I held the glass up again and the bartender bought me another. This time I held it securely before turning to Joey. So, I don't know what problem you're referring to. You're an asshole. My eyebrow rose and I tilted my head down, looking at her as you would a petulant child. That's not what you called me the other night as you were falling asleep in my arms. What was it again? Asian god of Se. Joey's hand came out, covering my mouth, and I smirked at the flush which raced across her cheeks. I swear, if you utter one more word, I'll break your nose. Her hand came away and I smirked, shrugging. Sure, if you think you could. Oh, I know I could. She spat, her hands going to her hips, the defiant little kid I knew 10 years ago, suddenly standing in front of me again. So, this is what is going to happen. Joey stepped closer, her perfume finally washing over me. Jasmine and orchid. It was a scent I hadn't been able to get out of my clothing or the pillow she had slept on, and I had even swapped them to smell it as I drifted to sleep the night before. You and I are not going to speak to each other at all today. And if you utter a single word about what happened the other night, I will crucify you. Do you understand me? I smirked, leaning back on the bar. I like the sound of that. I've heard of those BDSM racks. Joey turned away from me, muttering obscenities, and I chuckled as she turned back to me and her hands went to her hips again. Alex, Alexander, Zan, or whatever the fuck you call yourself. I don't want Jake finding out about what happened between us. Ouch. Speaking of names, Jolene, Joey, or Rosie. By the way, I like Rosie. It reminds me of your temper and the color of your hair. Which, by the way, looks nice. You're changing the subject. Of course I am. I replied, shifting my gaze to the dress she looked like she'd been poured into. And that dress, although a couple shades too light, does fucking amazing things to your... Joey's hand came up, her fist closed, and I ducked my head back slightly, catching her wrist before she could land a blow to my nose. Careful, sweetheart. I pulled her closer, earning a yelp of surprise and leaned in, hissing in her ear, inhaling the sweet scent of her perfume. I could do some very, very naughty things to you, because you just tried to hit me, but I think you'd like that. Just like you loved me fucking you 2 nights ago. I still remember the way you moaned, crying out as... She wrenched her hand away from me and stepped back, feigning anger, but I could see the blush that had taken over her cheeks and the heaving of her chest as she tried to calm herself. Just stay the fuck away from me and keep your mouth shut. Joey spun on her heels and stomped from the baroom, pushing past one of the other groomsmen who was walking through the door. He looked from Joey to me and back before shrugging and walking over to me. Hey, Alex, long time no see. I blinked and stared at the young man, not being able to place his name to save my life. Jake had always entertained a large group of idiots. I'm John. John Masters. Oh, yeah, how have you been? I asked, shaking his hand. Yeah, going okay. Just opened my own auto repair shop over the other side of town. Business is good. How about you? I really didn't want to be making small chat with John or anyone else. I wanted to chase Joey down and apologize to her and promise her I wouldn't say anything to Jake about our night together. I didn't want my brother knowing either. We were only just civil to each other as it was. He would completely lose his shit if he found out, and I didn't want Mom killing me. Jake said something about you moving to New York? I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply, and turned back to my drink, sculling it back in one go. Yeah, 10 years ago. Wow, must be awesome living in the Big Apple. You'd think so. I turned my head, looking out the bank of windows to the courtyard outside. Joey had been stopped by Jake, and the pair looked like they were arguing. I frowned and turned on my stool, watching them carefully for any sign I'd have to come to Joey's rescue. I'd love to go to the Big Apple. John was still droning beside me, and I tried to concentrate on the pair outside, my little brother and his stunning best friend, the woman I was suddenly infatuated with. Maybe I can come, and you can show me around? Joey shook her head at Jake, and he visibly deflated, before she stomped off, back toward the side of the building the bridal party was getting ready in, and I turned back to John. Sure, just grab my number off Jake. I picked myself up, leaving the kid at the bar. Like fuck I was showing him around anywhere. He'd never get my number off Jake because the only one in the family who had it was Mom. Stepping outside into the late afternoon, I wandered toward my brother. Everything good? Jake blinked and turned to me, concern washing over his features. I don't know. Joey has been all out of whack about this wedding for weeks. She doesn't seem to like Phoebe, and I just can't seem to get either of them to talk civilly to each other. Can't imagine why they don't want to talk, I muttered. I knew exactly why. Joey was in love with Jake. Jake was marrying Phoebe, and Phoebe was a world-class bitch with an obsessive streak, which meant she was not going to share Jake, especially with someone like Joey. It was a circle of pain, and I knew the only one who was going to get hurt was Joey. I know, right? I love Phoebe. She's amazing. But Joey is my best friend. Ah. Jake sank to one of the small benches beside the koi pond and put his head in his hands. The sun was shining unflatteringly on him, and I put my knuckles against my lips, holding back laughter, as I realized he'd inherited Dad's bald spot. That was going to go down well when Phoebe found out. I have an insane sexual connection with Phoebe. But Joey is. Jake looked up at me and frowned, as if he'd realized who he was speaking to. Never mind. Look, thanks for coming. I know we haven't always gotten along, but we're still brothers. Oh, how I wanted to tell the little shit to shove it up his ass. I was only here for Mom and Dad and Joey. I frowned and turned my head away, looking toward the bridal area. What had they been arguing about? I wanted to burst into the bridal room and drag Joey out and whisk her away to safety, somewhere she didn't have to watch what was about to happen. We grab a drink, maybe end up in bed again. Yeah, sure, I muttered, turning back to Jake. I crossed my arms over my chest as I watched my brother fidget with the hem of his tailored suit. We couldn't be more different if we tried, and I failed to see what Joey ever saw in my brother. He was skinny, looking like he'd blow away in a strong breeze. He still had acne at 23, and was I picking apart his inadequacies because I couldn't believe someone as beautiful as Joey could be in love with him? I feel so bad. We've been so close for so long, it's going to feel weird not to be able to have her just pun like she used to. Jake looked up at me and frowned and changed the subject. You left so suddenly last night. I wanted to ask, have you found anyone? Someone you could have brought to the wedding? I blinked at him. No. Oh, shame. I was not about to tell him I had found someone and that she was already here. Okasan is right, you know. You're the oldest. You should be married and have kids by now. Jake stood, clamping a hand on my shoulder as he stepped past me. Looks like I might finally beat you at something. 17. Joey, and I, Jacob Kazumi, take you, Phoebe Louise Fitzgerald, as my lawfully wedded wife. Jake's words speared through me, striking right at my heart, and I felt it shatter into a million pieces. Again. For what seemed to be the 100th time since Jake and Phoebe had become engaged. My eyes closed, and I fought back tears as Jake finished his vow to his fiancée. Then it was Phoebe's turn, and my stomach threatened to void itself of the single piece of toast and shot of whiskey I'd managed to choke down since this morning. With her part done, the priest took over the ceremony, and I knew there wasn't very much longer before it was all over. If there is anyone here who objects to this union, speak now, or forever hold their peace. My gaze moved through the crowd, willing someone, anyone, to stand up and say something. Just a simple no. All I wanted was someone to say something, so I could wake up tomorrow and have my best friend back and chalk this all up to a bad nightmare. That was all. It was such a simple wish. I wanted Jake and I to go back to what we had. Our gross takeaway food and shitty horror movies. The days spent talking trash about celebrities on TV. My gaze moved through the crowd, trying to see if someone would say something. But everyone else was doing the same thing, looking around the crowd to see if anyone would object, and I almost burst into tears with the realization everyone here was fine with this happening. Even Pa Kazumi didn't utter a word, and that was saying something. I knew he didn't like Phoebe. I bit the inside of my lips together and moved my gaze through the crowd one last time. Sitting in the front row of chairs, alongside his and Jake's mom, Alex stared right back at me, his dark gaze intense. He raised an eyebrow, a smirk coming to his lips, as if goading me to be the one to make a move, to speak my mind, to tell Jake what I really thought. but I'd never been one for confrontations or being the center of attention, so I did the same thing I always did. I dropped my gaze and said nothing. My lip trembled and I swallowed the lump in my throat as the priest spoke again. So be it. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, I now pronounce you man and wife. You may now kiss your bride. The crowd erupted in cheers and wolf whistles, and I turned away, not wanting to see Jake and Phoebe seal their vows with a kiss. I tried to keep the tears at bay by concentrating on anything else I could. A stray flower fluttering in the breeze, the spider web tucked in the edge of the concrete garden railing, the feeling of someone's gaze on me. My gaze slipped to Alex again, who had crossed his arms over his chest and was still staring at me. His gaze softened a little when he realized I was looking at him, but when his brother and new wife stepped away from the priest and made their way down the aisle, Alex's gaze followed them and changed to one of anger. Why? He and Jake hadn't spoken in 10 years, so what was there to be angry about? Waiting for the bridal party to step in behind the now married couple, I sighed to myself and fell into the back of the procession, my head down, and tried to remain as calm as possible. My stomach hurt, my eyes burned, and all I wanted to do was escape back to my apartment, crawl into bed, and cry until I couldn't anymore, and my heart was stone. Everything I had dreamed of with Jake had been taken by another woman. And I knew even though I should have spoken up earlier and said something to him, I still blamed Phoebe for the predicament I was in now. Deep down I knew I was the one to blame. I just couldn't bring myself to lay it at my own feet. Not just yet. We walked through the stunning gardens, full of beautiful flowers, heady and sweet, but my broken heart dulled their scent and brightness. It seemed like now, all I saw was black and gray. Everyone stood in the garden for photos, and I tried to smile and be happy. I really did. I hoped I hadn't stuffed up the photos for them, because even though my heart was broken, I didn't want to completely ruin something which I couldn't change. Jake came up to me, wrapping his arms around me, and he hugged me to his chest. "Ah, come on, Joey. Be happy for me." I buried my face against his chest, holding on to him for dear life, and fought back tears. "I am happy for you, Jake. So happy." I just wasn't happy for me. He kissed the top of my hair and stepped back, kissing my forehead, and returned to Phoebe, who shot daggers toward me as her bridesmaids fixed her hair and the train of her dress, ready for the next set of photos. She could do that. I didn't care anymore. Their vows had been set in stone now, and her words from earlier bounced around inside my head. "You're not going to be seeing him very often." I believed her. Every single word of it. There was no chance in hell I was ever going to be seeing Jake without her being there. The time we had been friends had practically been wiped away, stolen by Phoebe. I looked at the woman who now owned my best friend's heart and couldn't even muster enough anger to flip her off. The sight of me being so broken must have satisfied her, because she lifted her chin, looking down at me, as she smirked and wrapped herself around Jake. I turned away from the sight, left the gardens, and fell apart. 18. Alex. I'd missed most of the ceremony because I'd been too busy watching Joey. Watching every word the priest spoke, every vow Jake and Phoebe made, sucked the joy and life out of her. She deflated, her shoulders slumping, her flowers held loosely in her hands, and at one point I was sure she would faint. This was destroying her, and there wasn't a damned thing I could do. Sure, when the priest asked if anyone objected, I looked at her, goading her into saying something. Show me the spark that I'd seen earlier and the fire which she'd burned me with on Thursday night, but she had just dropped her head like a child being told off and stayed silent. I mean, I could have said something. Stood up and told Jake I thought he was making a mistake, or that Joey was in love with him. Couldn't he see he was breaking her heart? But I didn't, because of the woman by my side. Mom would disown me for sure if I had stood up and said anything, even if it was to help Joey. It was bad enough I'd been chewed out by Mom and my grandmother for wearing all black to the wedding. So I had just sat in the chair and sulked. Now I was standing here, getting photos taken with my parents and my brother, like we were a happy family, when all I wanted to do was belt the shit out of Jake. My gaze couldn't help in seeking out his best friend to make sure she was okay. The crowd wasn't huge, so I knew I would be able to pick her out in that disgusting colored dress, but I couldn't. She was gone. I stepped away from my parents and Jake and turned in circles, looking for the broken woman, but no matter how many times I looked, I couldn't find her. Fuck. Making sure my mom was occupied or I'd be crucified, I quickly left the garden and headed back toward the bridal suite. That would be where she was, probably trying to make an escape, and if she was, I wouldn't stop her. I'd probably drive her home. As I got closer to the rooms, I stopped, tilting my head to the side, and turned away from them toward the back of the compound where the cars were. I closed my eyes and tilted my head to the side again, trying to pick out the sound I'd heard. There. A sob. My stomach sank to my feet as I strode out into the car park and moved between the cars until I found her. Leaning with her back against one of the tires on Jake's car, Joey's head was buried against the knees of her dress, her arms wrapped around them as her shoulders shook and another sob escaped. I sighed and walked closer, crouching down in front of her, and my hand went to her shoulder. "Hey there, doll." "Fuck off, Alex." "Not on your life, sweetheart." I sank down onto my ass on the pebbled driveway, bringing my knees toward my chest, resting my forearms on them, and watched her. Another sob. I wasn't good at this sappy crap. The last woman to cry in front of me had been the wife of a clan member when I'd gone to tell her he'd been killed on a routine patrol. Before that, a straggler who thought by climbing into my bed she'd be able to climb the social ladder of the Takata clan. She had become a puddle of tears when I had called security and had her escorted out of my apartment and charged with breaking and entering. But seeing Joey so vulnerable and crying tore something inside me. "Come on, sweetheart, you're gonna ruin your dress." Joey's sobs subsided and she lifted her head, glaring at me. Her makeup was smudged, her mascara running in black lines down her face, and she clenched her jaw. "Does it look like I give a fuck?" With that, she picked up the skirt of the dress and wiped her face, smearing lipstick and mascara across the green silk. Well, that's one way to do it. Although, I reached out and brushed my thumb across her bottom lip. "You missed a smudge." Joey's hand whipped up, slapping at mine, and I chuckled as she picked up her skirt and rubbed furiously at her face. "Fucking stupid wanker and his whore of a fucking wife." I blinked, putting my fist to my mouth, biting my knuckles, and she glared at me. "Don't you even say a fucking thing, Alexander Kazumi." "Wasn't going to, doll. Promise." I smirked and she narrowed her gaze at me before sighing. "I've lost him." The smile faded from my face, and I turned my head, looking back toward the gardens. I could hear laughter, but it didn't do anything to lighten the mood of the woman in front of me. If Jake could only see what this was doing to her, maybe he might realize how much of a mistake he was making. But knowing my brother, that wouldn't happen. He'd just tell Joey she was being stupid and he loved Phoebe and blah, blah, blah. "Where have you been for the last 10 years? I blinked, turning my head back to her. "Huh? You left 10 years ago. Jake said you lost your shit one day and just left and haven't been back since. Why?" The way she looked at me, innocent and broken, I wanted to tell her what had happened all those years ago. Why I had left, why Jake had a broken nose, and why I couldn't come back. But I also knew today was not the day to dig into the past. She was so raw from the wedding. I couldn't break her heart any further. Just wanted a change. And I haven't come back because I've been busy working. "And you come back because Jake asked you to?" "No, Ma did," I replied, turning my head back to the venue. People would be heading into the reception soon. We'd have to head back before someone decided to spread a rumor about us disappearing. I didn't come back for Jake. I came back for Ma and Pa. Joey pursed her lips and frowned, looking toward the venue. "And what about me?" She turned back to me. "Did you know?" "About what? Who you were on Thursday night?" She nodded, and I shook my head. "Of course. I didn't. You said your name was Rosie, and I hadn't seen you since you were 13. I wasn't expecting." I gestured to her whole body. This and the incredible night we had. Joey rolled her eyes and climbed to her feet, looking down at me. "Well, that incredible night was a mistake, one that isn't going to happen again." I sighed and climbed to my feet, brushing my hands across my backside to get rid of any dirt. "Wow, that's a bit cold. What am I supposed to say, Alex? Thanks for fucking me?" "Well," Joey glared at me, and I chuckled. Relax. I'm not going to tell my brother what happened if that's what worries you. No, what worries me is that. Her lips pursed and my grin faded. Never mind. Just keep your distance. I don't want Jake thinking anything is going on, because there's not. I mean, ugh. She turned and stormed off, leaving me in the car park, and I tipped back my head, closing my eyes. When I'd realized who she was, one of my first instincts was to get in the hire car and go back to the hotel and forget the whole thing. But now, with how broken she was, I had to stay and keep an eye on her, make sure she didn't do anything stupid, and if she did, that I would be there to back her up. I'd rescued her once before. I would happily do it again. 19. Joey. The party was a little dull, the two families barely mingling with each other, and you could have cut the tension in the air with a knife. Maybe the overly elaborate small sword, which was sitting on the edge of the cake table. Speaking of the cake, it stood in the corner of the room, at least 5 tiers tall, loaded with garish flowers and the ugliest wedding toppers I'd ever seen. I swore I heard that Phoebe's mother had made it and knew. No doubt it was either going to be dry as fuck or hideously sweet. I blinked at my own internal criticism of the cake and stared at the floor. I'd had too much to drink. I could feel the buzz from the alcohol, dulling my senses, and I knew it was a bad thing. It wouldn't take me much to go over and topple that damned cake. Staring at the bridal table each time Jake and Phoebe kissed or touched, all I wanted to do was walk up and stab her in the eye. And I knew if I drank much more, I would have the bravado to do just that. I'd gotten over my pity party after the 3rd drink and was ready to throw down anyone. Thinking of ways you can off her? I know a guy. I turned my head, looking at Alex, who plonked his perfect ass in the seat next to me. I rolled my eyes, looking back at the happy couple, as he continued. It'd be free for you. I can put it on my tab. I bit my lips together, lowering my gaze for a moment before I turned my attention back to him. The look he gave, the tone of his offer, I didn't know if he was joking or not. Oh, yeah. Might have to take you up on that one day. Alex chuckled and leaned forward, his arm going around the back of my chair as he whispered in my ear. The scent of his aftershave washed over me, encompassing me and taking me straight back to Thursday night. This dress definitely looks better on you than that piece of green slime she had you wearing. I looked down at the dark blue dress I'd changed into. Thanks. Phoebe had had a fit when she saw that I had changed, but I made up some bullshit excuse and said I'd gotten my period early and there was blood all over the back of it. Her face had been one of horror, and she had muttered profanities at me, but in the end, she couldn't do anything about it, and she had all but puked when I offered to show her the dress. I was just glad she didn't call my bluff. The other dress was fucked. Mascara, lipstick, and tears would do that to green silk. I had an idea to leave it where Phoebe could find it, but I knew Jake wouldn't be impressed. You're welcome, doll. God, why was him calling me that such a turn-on? Was it because I'd been so touch-starved for over a year and in love with someone else that a soft word or night of passion instantly turned me to mush? Or was it the idea that this beautiful man, regardless of who he was genuinely attracted to me? Do you want to dance? I blinked and turned, looking at him. His face was so close. It wouldn't take much for me to lean across and kiss him right then and there. Now, wouldn't that cause a stir? I don't think that's a good idea. Alex blinked, his gaze shifting to the bridal table, then back, a slight tinge of anger hitting his voice. Why not? As you've said, you've lost him now. Why not have a bit of fun? Wow, thanks for ripping my heart open again. I sucked my tongue over my teeth and glared at him, earning a wry smirk. Oh, doll, have I hit a nerve? I'll hit you. I spat back, trying to sound more confident than I actually was. Alex leaned in, his dark gaze the only thing in my field of vision, and my heart kicked into overdrive as my stomach contracted with a sudden spike of desire. What did I tell you? I would do naughty things to you if you hit me. I blinked at him, realizing he might actually be goading me on to see how far he could push me before I snapped. Was this a game to him? Was he enjoying this? You wouldn't. He smirked, his gaze lowering to my lips before lifting to mine again. Try it and find out. You just might like it. Nope, I would be doing no such thing. I was already pushing my luck with Alex now as it was, just sitting here, talking to him. I'd been avoiding Alex like the plague since the ceremony. Jake had asked about us. Why one of his friends had seen us coming from the car park, my dress dirty and the smug look on his brother's face. I'd told him his friend was a lying twat, and Alex had helped me when I'd fallen over, after I'd gone to be sick because I hadn't eaten since this morning, because Phoebe had told me not to, so the dress would fit properly. That hadn't gone down well, but I was beyond caring now. He had no say in anything I did anymore. Jake had a wife now. Alex's smooth, sexy voice came back to my ears again, and I had to stop myself from swooning, remembering what it did to me the other night. "Come on, Jolene. Come and dance with me." I turned my head, looking back at the bridal table, to Jake watching me, a confused look to his features. My face heated with embarrassment, and I was about to tell Alex to shove it, when Phoebe leaned over, turning Jake's face to hers, and purposely kissed, glaring at me the whole time. For fuck's sake, this woman was an all-consuming jealous bitch, and I'd had enough. My jaw clenched, and I turned back to Alex, seeing his eyebrow raise with my obvious change. "You know what? Fuck it. Let's go." 20. Alex. Guiding Joey through the crowd of family and friends and onto the dance floor had raised a few eyebrows. Pulling her into my arms, holding her close to me while we danced, started the whispers. Not even my father's parents, my Sofubo, would speak to me when they had arrived at the come to the wedding. My grandmother had just glared at me, muttered to herself about me being a disappointment to the family, and then had walked away to mingle with other family and no doubt spread falsities. Yeah, well, this disappointment was what kept her and my grandfather comfortable and out of a damned nursing home. If it wasn't for me, Oto-san and Oka-san would have lost the family business years ago. And then who would have been the disappointments? I honestly didn't care. Didn't care about the people whispering behind their hands and drinks, about how I had abandoned the family when I was young, and now it was Jake who was keeping everything going with the family, that I was the black sheep of the family. If only they knew the truth. "What are you thinking about?" Joey's voice brought me back to the present, and I looked down at her, as she stared up at me. She had washed away the caked-on makeup that Phoebe had made her wear, and she was now the stunning, natural beauty I'd met outside the club on Thursday night. I smiled, pulling her a little closer, earning a flush to her already pink cheeks. I didn't want to bog her down with what was racing through my mind, so I did the one thing I was good at, when it came to her. Compliment. About how much you've grown up and how beautiful you've become. Her face flushed again, and she turned her head away, a smirk to her pretty mouth. Flirt. I chuckled as we moved, swaying our bodies not to the music being played, but to something different altogether. A rhythm only we knew. There seemed to be a current that was running through us, which I couldn't help but think wouldn't be able to be severed in a hurry. "Hey, if you can, why not do it? Plus, I expressly remember you didn't mind my flirting on Thursday night." Joey's gaze turned back to me, wide-eyed, and she glanced around the room before she hissed at me. That was before I realized who the fuck you were. I sucked my tongue over my teeth and raised an eyebrow. Why was she so against what had happened? We'd both had fun, and no one else knew what had happened. It was between us and would stay that way. I wasn't about to go skipping off to my brother and tell him I fucked his best friend. That would go down about as well as a fart in church. So, changes nothing. "It changes everything, Alex," Joey replied, shaking her head, keeping her voice low. She glanced around the room again, as if every single person in it could hear what we were saying. She looked back at me again, pursing her lips, and whispered, "You're my best friend's brother, the brother he doesn't like. Imagine what he would say if he found out we—" Her voice trailed off, her cheeks flushing again, and I smirked, leaning in closer, my body flooding with need. How the fuck could I still be so hot for her, even after finding out who she was? She was 9 years younger than me, my little brother's best friend, and right now, the only woman I wanted. I would happily take her out to the car park and bend her over one of the cars. Found out what? That we fucked. That you took every single inch of my cock, and— Stop. She hissed, glaring at me, and I chuckled, spinning her across the dance floor, very aware of my brother's gaze on us. It'd been a constant thing, since Joey had agreed to dance with me. Fuck him. I was sick of playing the nice older brother. That ship had sailed. He didn't deserve to have someone as loyal as Joey anywhere near him, and Joey deserved someone who would treat her like the goddess she was. I knew that wasn't my brother. Look what he'd done to her already. He'd broken her into a million pieces and was happy enough to let his new wife dance on what was left of her heart. Hey, what if I don't want to stop? I asked, one of my hands lowered from her waist, cupping the side of her hip, and I heard her inhale sharply. The heat of her skin, only a thin layer of fabric away from my hand, was driving me insane, but I wouldn't act on what I wanted. Not right here, with everyone to see. I had to be a bit more tactical than that. What if I want more of Thursday? Joey stopped mid-dance and stared at me, her mouth popping open. What? I smirked, still holding her, and leaned in closer. Her breath hitched as my lips brushed against her ear, and I whispered, I want more. Standing straighter, I smiled as she stared at me, as if I had lost my mind. But I could see the flush to her cheeks again and the heaving of her chest. My words had done their job, thrown her off and taken her mind off Jake, even if it was for a few moments. I hoped it would lead to what I wanted it to lead to. Her. I just wanted her again. But this time, instead of a quick fuck on the sofa, I would take my time and taste every single little morsel of her. Thank you for the dance. It was quite entertaining. I winked and let go of her. You know where I'm staying. Stepping back, I turned, throwing a bored glance at my brother and his new wife, which was met with thinly veiled anger, and I snorted a half laugh at his attempt at intimidation and turned, walking out of the reception. I needed air. Before I went back to Joey, kissed her in front of everyone, and broke my promise to Oliver that I would behave myself at the wedding. 21. Joey,